Hello, fellow classmates and professor. It is Mokita. First of all, I want to say sorry that I could not be with the class today because I've been busy working at the hospital, making sure patients and employees are doing well. But I hope you all are staying safe and keeping your distance from others. But anyway, let's jump into my presentation. My presentation is on one of the famous psychologists in America today, which is Albert Bandura and his theory of personality, which is cognitive learning theory. Born on December 4th, 1925 in a small town in Alberta named Mundare. In a family of six, as the youngest child and son alone, Bandura was confident in self and inducted from the educational limits in a remote area. These characteristics were mainly established and helpful in his long career. Bandura was from Polish and Ukrainian descent. His father came from Poland and his mother is from Ukraine. Bandura's parents had a crucial influence in motivating him to try projects out of the tiny town which they lived. In the summer after graduating high school, Bandura worked in the Yukon to stop the Alaska Highway from sinking. Earlier, Bandura credited his research in the northern tundra as the root of his interest in human psychology. It was in this encounter in the Yukon that he was introduced to a subculture of drinking gamble, which helped expand his outlook and the reach of his view on life. After enrolling at the University of British Columbia, Bandura soon became intrigued by psychology. He started out as a major in the biological sciences, and his interest in psychology was very accidental. When working nights and going to school with a group of students, he found himself arriving at school earlier than he planned. To pass time, he started to take full lessons during these early mornings, which led him to come upon psychology. Then in 1949, he graduated from the University of British Columbia with a bachelor's degree in psychology. After 3 years of studying, then moved to the US to go to graduate school at the University of Iowa. Bandura was awarded his MA degree in 1951 and his PhD degree in clinical psychology in 1952. While he was studying in Iowa, he met the love of his life, Virginia Varn, and they got married at that same year in 1952 and raised two children together. After earning his PhD, he was offered a job at Stanford and accepted it. He started working at Stanford in 1953, has continued to work at the university to this day. It was during his research on adolescent violence that Bandura became increasingly interested in vicarious thinking, modeling, and imitation. And there's more info as well. And, and about 22 years after that, he became the president of APA, American Psychology Association. In 1977, he became to be known as the father of cognitive theory. And in the early 2000s, he was awarded with the Outstanding Life Contribution to Psychology by APA. Fun fact, he's currently still living at the age of 94. And hopping on to social learning theory, by looking at other people such as observational learning or modeling, you will learn new knowledge and behavior. Components of observational learning, which is attention. Attention, observers cannot know unless they pay attention to what's going on around them. This phase is affected by the characteristics of the model, such as how much one likes or associates with the model, and the characteristics of the observer, such as the perception of the observer or the level of emotional excitement. And then you have retention. Retention is the observers must not only consider the observed activity, but they must also recall it at some later time. This method depends on the ability of the observers to code or organize the information in an easily remembered form or to rehearse the behavior of the model mentally or physically. Production. Observers must physically and or mentally capable of performing a act. In certain situations, the analyst has a requisite answer, but often reproducing the behavior of the model can require the skill that the observer has not yet acquired. It's one thing to watch a circus juggler carefully, but it's quite another to go home and repeat the act. Then you have motivation. Generally, observers can act only if they have any incentive or justification to do so. The effect of reinforcement or punishment, either on the model or directly on the observer, becomes the most important factor. in this process. Attention and retention accounts for the acquisition or learning of the behavior of the model. And then you have production and motivation influences the results. More on social cognitive learning theory. Social cognitive learning theory, human beings can learn by observing and modeling others. The theory of social cognitive learning describes human behavior in terms of continuous interaction between cognitive, behavioral, and environmental factors. Then you have the importance of observing and modeling the behavior, attitude, and emotional reaction of others is addressed in this learning theory. So, for example, human development represents a dynamic relationship of the individual, the action of the individual, and the environment. The relation between these elements is referred to as reciprocal determinism. A person's cognitive ability, physical features, temperament, values, attitudes, and so on affect his or her action and environment. However, these effects are reciprocal. A person's actions may influence his or her feelings about himself, or herself, and his or her attitudes and beliefs about others. Most of what a person learns from environmental tools such as television, parents, and books. The atmosphere also influences behavior. What a person sees can have a powerful effect on what it does. But the action of an individual often relates to his or her environment. So basically, this theory indicates that there are three special characteristics for human beings. First is the vicarious effect, the model and imitator, which is the occupational challenge for people working in volunteering in the fields of victim service, law enforcement, emergency medical services, fire services, and other allied professions due to their continuous exposure to victims of trauma and violence. For example, people can either be more cynical or fearful, or they can be more appreciative of what they have, or both. Responses to vicarious effects can be negative, neutral, or positive, can change over time, and can vary from individual to individual, particularly with prolonged exposure. And second, you have the self-observing, observation of one's own countenance and appearance, examination of one's own thoughts or emotion. And then you also have the ability to regulate own action, basically just controlling your own behavior and stuff, which you all know. And then now we jump right into the vocal dog experience. As you can see, like, put some pictures in this PowerPoint to show you guys that what the kids saw from after watching the video of the man beating the vocal doll, and basically they're reciprocating the same attitude and same results from watching the video. As you can see, that this research illustrated observational learning and effects on aggressive activity in children upon seeing an outcome hit a doll in either praise, discipline, or not. Children were seen to have developed violent behavior. If a model is praised for his or her action, the observer is more likely to imitate his or her behavior. The more the observer likes or values the pattern, the more likely that they are to imitate their behavior. Basically, this was Bandura's most successful work in 1961. For the experiment, he made a video in which an adult model was seen beating up a bubble doll and shouting offensive phrases. The movie was then shown to a group of children. After that, the children were allowed to play in a room that had a bubble doll. Anyone who saw the violent image of the film were more inclined to beat the doll, imitating the act and expression of the adult in the video clip. The bubble doll study was significant because it departed from behaviorism instance that each one's behavior is directed by reinforcement or reward. The children received no encouragement and incentive to beat up the doll. They were simply imitating the behavior they observed. Bandura termed this phenomenon observational learning and characterized the weather of effective observational learning as attention, retention, production, and motivation. Bandura's work emphasized the importance of social influence, but also had a belief in personal control. He also suggested that people with high assurance in their capabilities approach difficult tasks as challenges to be mastered instead of as threats to be avoided. Now going into social cognitive learning theory in education. Um, students also know a lot by watching other people, and that's very true because whatever a teacher does, we also reciprocate back, and also, because someday you got students that look up to the teachers and want to be like them, or parents, for example, or other things. And then now describing the effects of action will effectively increase acceptable behaviors and decrease incorrect behaviors. And this includes addressing incentive and consequences with learning. Modeling is an approach to influencing teaching of new habits. Parents, teachers, and mentors must model correct behavior and ensure that they don't model unacceptable behaviors. For example, like this part, um, of course, like parents and teachers and mentors want to be role models to kids that they work with or be with, or so they can be great people in this world and stuff like that, for example, so they can spread the love and show affection, so those kids can grow up to be great human beings. So anyways, more on this slide. Social cognitive theory attempts to incorporate both the environment and cognition to explain how people learn. The most important thing to realize about the theory is that when one aspect of student changes, it affects other parts. So if you change the student's belief that he really can learn the academic content, which is a personal factor, he studied longer, which is the behavior, and people around him tells him that what a good student he is, which is the environment, which in turn reinforces the original starting point that he can learn the material, and the cycle continues upward. The same can happen in a negative way. The student does not believe he can learn the material, so he doesn't study, and then everyone around him tells him he is not a good student. Then the cycle continues downward until the student gives up trying to learn. And yeah, for sure. Like this definitely makes a great point, and Albert Bandura definitely had a huge effect on the educational community, and people still carry this to this day, and and they also learn from his model, and like he's he's very recognized, and also is known to be the fourth most recognized psychologist in the world today. Anyways, to conclude my presentation, I had a great time learning about Albert Bandura and his social cognitive learning therapy. But nowadays, people um, regard Bandura as the greatest living psychologist and one of the most influential psychologists of all time. Thank you for watching my presentation. Please take care of yourself and wash your hands. Please do that. And take care, guys. Blessings to you all. Peace.